welcome to the Bible.boring podcast. And I would just like to say, wow. This is the first episode of season 2. Happy 2026, everybody.
Happy 2026.
So this is John Tell. She is from Morris Shalomie.
And your mom.
And my mom. So today we are going to do the first chapter of Exodus. I originally wanted to do Genesis, but then we have the creation, the Garden of Eden, the flood, and those are kind of crazy topics that I'd want to touch down on a lot better, and I just need to get some episodes out. So that's what we're doing. So, yeah, we'll do Genesis sometime later, but today we are starting the first chapter of Exodus, which is a pretty action-packed book. Well, the first five chapters are action-packed, and after that it's just building the temple.
Yeah, which I actually love.
You do?
Yeah, I love the temple talk in Exodus and Leviticus.
We should do a podcast about construction of the temple, but in a more entertaining way that people can understand. Because whenever I listen to people saying something about that, I have such a hard time getting it through my head.
Yeah, I think reading it the first time too is also very challenging, because you're it's this many cubits and this many widths covered in this kind of wood, and you read a lot of that same verbiage over and over again, and it gets a little lost. But the temple, I think, is super representative of Yeshua, and so it's just when you start looking at it through that lens, then it just becomes just really exciting.
Maybe it could be a special video episode with pictures of the temple and stuff.
Maybe.
All right. Well, any life you want to catch up on?
Well, we moved into a new home and a new space, so that's very exciting. We're recording our first podcast in the new home, and we are still in the process of moving, so that's exciting.
Yeah, a new season, new house.
Yeah, lots of new things. Grandma's going to be joining us and co-living in this space, so it's going to be a lot of new exciting things.
Yeah, well, I feel like I had so many things to say about life, but I forgot them, so I'll probably talk about those some other time. But anything else before we jump right into
Now Exodus? I'm really excited to do Exodus. Let's go.
Let's go. Alright, so what we're going to do is we are going to read some of the beginning notes I have before the chapter starts.
Oh, okay.
Because, introduction. So, I feel like we did Jonah before, remember?
Uh-huh.
So that was one of our things that we did. And that really shows, the nature of how God works. And I feel like Exodus is kind of an add-on to that. I mean, don't get me wrong, all pieces of the Bible show the nature of the Lord, but some do a lot more than others. I wouldn't say that King Solomon, the first Kings, or Esther necessarily shows the nature of the Lord as much as Jonah or Exodus would.
I think it just depends on the lens you're looking through. I think some people can look at it and see a great deal differently, perhaps, different perspective, but I'm looking forward to hearing your breakdown of that and why you think that.
All right. So at this point of, Bible history, Israel is now not just a bunch of people that were born by a guy named Abraham. They are now their own country. Because remember, we've went a lot further into the Bible, before. We've went all the way
400 years, right? We've been, in Egypt now for 400 years.
Well, yeah, okay. I would say, because we've done other things that are a lot further in the Bible. Israel was its own nation, but right now, Israel has just become its new nation.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, they have their own laws, they have their own God. So the Exodus saga will begin.
Okay.
Anyway, I have a few more. So between Genesis and Exodus, 350 years have passed, maybe 400, that's what we were just saying. And you have to understand how fruitful the Israelites are. They are multiplying so quickly.
Yeah. And they haven't even received the promise yet of you know, fruitfulness in Deuteronomy.
Yeah. Genesis 46 says, "Go to Egypt and have a mighty nation." Exodus 1 said, "The children of Israel were fruitful and multiplied."
Yeah, they didn't know they weren't going to be able to help it.
Yeah.
Bound to go wow wow.
Anyways. Oh, man. Anyways. Okay. Okay. Another thing I would like to note is I have started to realize how extremely death obsessed Egypt is. It's crazy. They built these huge stinking pyramids for graves.
Well, and I think like they had multiple deities that were for death in the underworld.
They had a bunch of like death gods stuff that they could do.
Like they had a lot of gods in general, but they had multiple that were for death in the underworld. So
I mean, yeah, death is part of like the whole thing, like of life.
You know, the whole thing that they're like, people say you can't take it with you, but the Egyptians thought you could. So
yeah.
They built massive tombs to have in the underworld.
Yep. Weird, right? So for the first 200 years in Egypt, it was pretty good for Israel. I think it might be considered like one of their golden ages, one of their longer ones.
Mm-hmm.
Like King David was another golden age of Israel that ended at King Solomon's end of life. I think that's probably when their golden age ended over there.
Okay.
Because remember, King Solomon started having a bunch of idols and stuff. So the thing that I don't feel like that much people put like on is Egypt treated Israel okay. Like even when they were
You were telling me this, and I have a really hard time accepting it. So explain it.
Well, you know, Egypt. If you watch like Ten Commandments or something, they're like they were enslaved, they were tortured, malnourished. Which like Egypt wasn't a dumb nation. They were like the top tier nation. And they aren't just gonna be dumb and just make all the Israelites work and malnourish them and kill them. Because what use is that?
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a use for that. So not dismissing that they were mistreated, but not as bad
Oppressed.
as
I think oppressed is definitely.
They were oppressed. I don't think they were extremely mistreated. I mean, forced labor and everything, but they weren't like building these huge blocks.
Right. I think there is an assumption that scripturally that the Israelites built the pyramids, but historically it appears as though the pyramids were built before the timeline of the Israelites being in Egypt.
Yes.
And those are cultural and Hollywood depictions of slavery. So I'm kind of excited. Like I've read through Exodus more times than I can count.
Yeah, I have to.
But it's like I'm excited to read it again now that you've given me this cultural window that I've been viewing it through so that I can reassess as we go through it.
I mean, yeah, the pyramid building like era was like God when Jacob like first put foot on Israel.
Yeah.
That's when they stopped building pyramids. Like that was really, really long ago. So anyways, what's a little ironic is Egypt was like at its peak at that time, and it was the finest, like it was a land of plenty and beauty and art. And now I looked it up, and it says 60% of people are poor or vulnerable.
Modern day.
Yeah, modern day. Isn't that ironic?
Well, I mean, if they were decimated as a country at one time, which I think
when were they
decimated
as a country?
When the Israelites left and all of their livestock was, murdered and.
Yeah, Egypt tried to sue them nowadays.
I was just gonna say that it was like in the last couple of years, Egypt actually I think like tried to sue Israel for, it was something biblical and it was very strange.
It was for the damages they caused during the plagues.
Yeah, I'd have to look it up again. I say it and it doesn't sound like a real thing, but I swear it was like an article I read.
That just sounds so ridiculous.
It does. Again, I'd have to read it. I swear I read that and I was like, that is insane. Because Egypt also doesn't, as a nation, And
Israel.
these are just various things I've read, but like Egypt doesn't recognize the history of the Bible as a part of their history. You know, like it's not a part of their historical retelling.
More
and
evidence
so,
that God's real.
What's that?
More evidence that God's real.
Well, yeah, but so anyways, and I don't know that that's true or untrue. I just have read it at one time, never like verified, you know.
All right. All right. So anything to say finally before we get into the first chapter?
Let's go.
All right.
Am I doing a reading?
Please. Come on, we're keeping things classic. I know I'm a little bit older, but I'm the same age.
So,
All right.
You
so
got me reading the first book of Exodus, which the first chapter, which always has lineage, and I do not like reading lineage out of the complete Jewish Bible because they spell it Jewish and they're much harder to pronounce sometimes. So bear with me. I'll do my best.
All right. Yeah.
So these are the names of the sons of Israel who came into Egypt with Yaakov, which would be Jacob, each man with his household: Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. All told, there were 70 descendants of Yaakov. Yosef was already in Egypt. Yosef died, as did all his brothers and all that generation. The descendants of Israel were fruitful, increased abundantly, multiplied, and grew very powerful. The land became filled with them. Now there arose a new king over Egypt. He knew nothing about Yosef, but said to his people, "Look, the descendants of Israel have become a people too numerous and powerful for us. Come, let us use wisdom in dealing with them. Otherwise they'll continue to multiply. And in the event of war, they might ally themselves with our enemies, fight against us, and leave the land altogether." So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor, and they built for Pharaoh the storage cities of Pithom and Ramses. But the more the Egyptians oppressed them, the more they multiplied and expanded, until the Egyptians came to dread the people of Israel and worked them relentlessly, making their lives bitter with hard labor, digging clay, making bricks, all kinds of field work, and in all this toil they were shown no mercy. Moreover, the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was called Shiphrah and the other Puah. "When you attend the Hebrew women and see them giving birth," he said, "if it's a boy, kill him. But if it's a girl, let her live." However, the midwives were Yahuwah-fearing women, so they didn't do as the king of Egypt ordered, but let the boys live. The king of Egypt summoned the midwives and demanded of them, "Why have you done this and let the boys live?" The midwives answered Pharaoh, "It's because the Hebrew women aren't like the Egyptian women. They go into labor and give birth before the midwife arrives." Therefore, Yahuwah prospered the midwives, and the people continued to multiply and grow very powerful. Indeed, because the midwives feared Yahuwah, he made them founders of families. Then Pharaoh gave this order to all his people: "Every boy that is born, throw in the river, but let all the girls live."
All right. That's the thing about Exodus is that chapters are like so just like this happened, this happened, this happened. It's like not really giving you that much time to process. It's just like going thing by thing by thing by thing by thing. Like,
it's pretty quick.
Yeah, it is. The second chapter, it starts with Moses being born and goes all the way to right before the burning bush.
Oh, wow. Do you want to read? Are we doing two today or
no? I haven't
just one?
Studied yet.
Okay.
All right. So, anyways, let's get started. Okay. So when we get to verse 7, this ends Israel's golden age in Egypt, because they have like a golden age. You're fruitful and multiplying. We already talked about that. And it says this new Pharaoh didn't know Joseph, which was kind of interesting that he didn't know Joseph, because wouldn't that have been passed on? Like, this guy did all these things. He protected us from famine for 7 years.
It only takes one generation to forget.
Yeah, it is. But wouldn't that have been written down? It was Egypt. They would have written down things, right?
Yeah. But, it only takes one. It doesn't matter if it's written down. If it's not lived out with importance, then it dies. It dies. The knowledge dies.
Yeah, well, anyways, this Pharaoh did not plan on this Ramses. It was, I think, the Pharaoh before Ramses. He did not plan on keeping the deals and treaties that were with his ancestors with the Israelites. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, So now, like literally overnight, the Israelites are seen from literally being like loved, like neighbors, kind of like in Esther, all the way to just being known as a threat and a danger to Egypt.
Yes.
Yeah. So I thought, like, man, that's another thing about leadership. Leadership can, yeah. So the thing is, Pharaoh may have been exaggerating a little bit, like, they are mightier than us, they will join our enemies.
You know, it kind of shows the heart of the leader, right? Like, if a leader is confident in his authority and in his like headship, then why all of a sudden was he like, oh my gosh, like what if there was war? Like they would beat us, like, you know, it kind of shows the integrity of his heart as well. I think.
Yeah.
When people start panicking about being overthrown and war, it's usually because that's their intention, is to overthrow and create war and unpeace.
Yeah. Unpeace.
Shh.
Unpeace.
Shh.
Unpeace.
It's a word now.
Unpeace.
Yeah.
I gotta say that a lot. But, so they were probably around 25% of the overall population. Right?
It's a lot.
Yeah. Wait, so he may have been exaggerating, trying to so hard to depopulate. But I mean, when they were made slaves, like, no one fought back. It's just like, oh no, they harmed us. I guess we're slaves now. They're just like...
Well, like, I was trying to find it in Scripture a moment ago. I feel like there's a place in Scripture, it must be in Genesis, where it says, like, that they were buying and then they had no money and so they sold themselves in servitude.
This is also the complete Jewish Bible, so it might say it in another Bible. I'm pretty sure that says it.
It would say the same thing. It would just say it differently.
It does say that in the American Bible, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
That's what I remember. I remember it saying that. So...
And so they were indebted because they sold all their livestock, they sold all of their possessions, they had no money, they were indebted, and so they sold themselves in servitude. I'm pretty certain, I can't find it here in Scripture while I'm just kind of browsing, and so, I mean,
yeah,
you know, that servitude is a debt owed, and, you know, after whatever, like 400 years now of servitude, I don't know, you know, how that happens. I have to, it's been a long time since I've read through Genesis and Exodus, but...
we're defenseless, bye!
Yeah, right,
defenseless.
Like, how did it just carry over for 400 years? Like, that was their only source of...
Yeah, it's very unpeace.
It's very unpeace. And so anyways, and so, you know, it's like when you're at work and, you know, things become more workload falls on you, you're already being paid a wage. And so at that point, you know, you are indebted to the service. So.
No, another question. Do you think women were included in this forced labor?
Oh man, you told me this earlier. And again, it's one of those things where I've never really considered it because of how it's been culturally portrayed. And in Hollywood, where you just right, 10 Commandments,
good
you know, Prince of
but
Egypt,
not like necessarily accurate.
But then you brought up the fact of Pharaoh's wife paying Moses' mother to be a wet nurse, and so she would have been home nursing the baby. But Pharaoh's wife could have pardoned her or like ordained it to be so. But at the same time, like, somebody was raising babies, right? So it could have been that, you know, some women were in servitude as seamstresses or, you know, who knows, whatever else, you know, it says in the fields also, so growing food, doing vineyard work. But I would imagine still that there were some mothers home raising babies.
Yeah, they may have been made to do like lighter work, things like women do, go garden or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so
I'm sure it was varied.
So now at this point, like this Israelite work that the Pharaoh is enslaving is bringing the country back to glory.
hold on, I have one more thought.
Oh, yeah?
I'm also trying to think back in scripture where we would have seen a woman pay the debt, but there are laws of like something about if a servant is freed, like he can take his wife with him or something.
Unless he is with that person.
Or unless the master gave the wife. I can't remember. I'd have to go back and read those scriptures specifically.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyways.
So, the Israelite slaves are bringing the country back to glory, but the problem is, even though they've been forced to make more and more and more work, they're still making more babies like hotcakes.
Okay.
They're just... Oh, I'm going to go make some babies. I'm going to go make 50 babies and then I'll be
Well,
back.
Yah said that he told Abraham that he was going to make him a nation.
I did hear something that I thought was pretty profound.
Okay.
Like, the more that God's people are persecuted, the more fruit they are going to bring. Like, Israel has never produced more, had more, than during, like, some of the hardest exiles.
Seasons of oppression.
Seasons of oppression, like this.
Okay.
And it just shows that, like, when you're going through a hard time, it's like,
it produces the most fruit.
It produces the most fruit.
That's why we're called to endure, because the seasons of trial are the seasons that produce perfect faith.
Yes.
And that's the fruit. Oh, that's an interesting concept.
It's a little
I'll
profound.
have to ruminate on that a bit.
Okay. So, this part of the Bible, the midwives civilly disobeyed to obey God. Remember Shasha and Pua?
Uh-huh.
Shasha?
Don't think it was Shasha.
Shasha. Give me a little Shasha.
It was,
Shifra. It was Shifra. Shifra and Pua.
Shafira? I can't see it.
Shifra.
Shifra?
Yeah, Shifra.
And Pua. I'm sure it's
This is
different
going to be weird.
English translation.
That's going to be weird in transcript.
So, but this also says Hebrew midwives.
Yes. Is it Hebrew midwives or midwives of the Hebrews?
Well, it says Hebrew midwives.
But that wouldn't make any sense.
Why?
Because, okay, well, first of all, I don't think Pharaoh would be so dumb for them.
He could have, if they were servants, he could have certainly called them to the palace and been like, you're the midwives, and I ordain you, like, you know, to do this.
Well, then they're saying the Egyptian woman birthed faster, so it's easier for us to go to the Egyptian woman, but the Hebrew woman. So I feel like it was probably midwives of the Hebrews. That would make sense, right?
Well, I would have to do some studying here. I would have to look at some different translations because it really could go either way. It's conjecture if you say either or, because you don't have all the information here.
Yeah, we don't. So what?
We should look and see if like Shifra and Pua are Hebrew names or Egyptian names. You know, we could look at the translations. We could look at. So I'd have to do some studying.
Let's do that later.
To concur with you, sir.
All right. So, so these were like, they did obey God. This was the first act of civil disobedience in the Bible to obey God. Because this is just Exodus.
Yeah.
I mean, do you remember another one? I mean, there's Joseph, but he didn't civilly disobey because the Pharaoh's wife told him to sleep with him. That's not civil disobedience at all.
Right.
So anyways, when Pharaoh told his citizens to spy on the Israelites, and if one had a baby boy, then kill them, what actually would be going on is they would probably see what a baby boy, report it to the government officials, and then they would come and get them. It's not like they're just going throwing babies in the river.
Actually, it says just that. Every boy that is born, throw in the river.
Yeah, but I mean, it's Exodus and it's going really fast.
Right.
I don't think they would just go around.
So I know when you listen to Tom Bradford, he's giving a lot of cultural context.
I don't just listen to Tom.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just kind of making a statement here. I'm back and forthing with you, debating a bit here. I'm saying that based on this paragraph that we're reading, 15 through 22, there's a lot of information here that you can conjecture either way, right?
Yeah.
Like you can look at all the things and say, well, if he told the Hebrew midwives, it's very unlikely that the
Yeah.
Hebrew midwives are just stabbing babies.
Yeah.
Right? Because like then Hebrew women are probably not going to have the midwives in their homes.
And they didn't.
Right.
They would just go, what?
Is that your
Yeah.
illustration of Hebrew women having babies?
Yeah, because they birth them so fast.
Right. So you're right. That could be that is what's happening. That the Hebrew midwives are not going around actually murdering infants. That's so horrific to say. Like, ugh. And that they were reporting it to government officials who were then coming and doing the dirty work. But then when the Hebrew women don't do that, I want to see again with the Hebrew. He summoned and demanded of them, why have you done this and let the boys live? Because the Hebrew women aren't like the Egyptian women. And then he tells the officials to throw the boys in the river and let all the girls live.
Yeah. So that's probably...
It is a possibility. I will say it is a possibility that the Hebrew midwives were not, if they were to do that they were reporting it to government officials, not actually doing the dirty work.
Yeah, probably. So, yeah, if you're just looking at a window and go, Mom! Go report it to a government official. Okay. Anyways, so I found, one last thing is, I heard this verse of scripture, and I found it would be a little profound. It's John 5:46 through 47. If you believed Moses, you would believe me, for he wrote about me. This is Yeshua speaking here. And it's like, the Pharisee, what he's trying to say, he's trying to talk to the Pharisees because they believe Moses, but not like Yeshua.
Even though Moses was speaking of Yeshua.
Yes.
Yeshua.
But I feel like it could go both ways.
Because go ahead.
Yeah, I just feel like it could go both ways. Like, is this for Christians or not for Christians? I heard this one lady say.
You're talking about Torah, right? You're talking about whether or not to observe Torah.
Yeah, and I'm just like, I feel like it kind of clearly says it here. I mean, I know it's the other way, but I feel like it could go around.
So you're saying that if you believe... Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, because he says, if you love me, follow my commands. So if you believe Yeshua, then you would read the law of Moses.
Yeah, that's...
You're like saying that if one is true, then the other is also true.
Yeah.
I can see what you're saying.
So...
I don't think that everybody perceives it that way, but Yeshua did come and say, if you love me, follow my commands. And he was in unity with his Father, and yeah, it's good stuff. I love that.
So it's our job to do that, I feel like. So anyways, that's all my notes I have.
That was fun. That was fun to break down. You really challenged my perspective on some of the Hollywood portrayals of the Israelites as slaves in Egypt, and I definitely feel like I have kind of a jumping off point on some things that I want to dig a little deeper on.
Like what?
What I just said, the cultural portrayal of slavery, the Israelites in slavery in Egypt.
What do you mean to dig deeper? Well, let's not get all messy.
I mean to study it out.
I think to study it out. Okay, time to wrap it up. So thank you so much for being on here.
Yeah, this was really fun. I really enjoyed Exodus 1.
Thanks for taking your time. We'll be back for Leviticus. We'll be back for Genesis.
How about Exodus 2?
Exodus 2, yeah. What if I just read yeah, you need a premium membership to listen to Exodus 2 though, so yeah.
No, you don't.
I'm just joking.
Maybe one day.
Yeah, well, one day. I'd probably just give early access to the episodes if we did that. So, anyways, yeah, goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening.